All right, welcome back everyone. And today on the channel, I'm gonna be learning how to steam bend. It's something I've never done and I've always wanted to try it out, just drug my feet. So I finally went out and bought a steam generator, built a steam box, and I'm gonna make a chair for my first go at this. So this is gonna be my going to school stage where I'm just gonna be learning, probably making a ton of mistakes. And if it's something you're wanting to get into, hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and kind of speed up your learning process. So stick around and let's make a chair. All right, so step one for me in this whole process was coming up with a leg design to bend my leg assemblies around. So I used some 1/8" plywood that I got off a shipping crate. I stashed it away just for this type of process, making a template out of. So I grabbed a compass and a sheet of this plywood and just started messing around with different radiuses and what I want the leg assembly to kind of look like. And drew that out, got it cut out on the bandsaw, and then came back and hot glued some 2x4 material that I cut up to give this jig some thickness to actually use as a bending form. And then added screws to make it more permanently fastened, and then brought it back over to the bandsaw and finished trimming this up, getting it close to that radius. First thing is don't get in a rush and use junk wood that's got a ton of knots in it. You're gonna have a lot of breaks. It's just those knots are not gonna bend well. So that was my first problem, is just getting in a rush and not going out and hand picking some nice lumber to actually try doing this with. Now the other thing is using this construction grade lumber is it's kiln dried, and kiln dried is a big no-no for steam bending. You can do it, but you'll find that you're gonna have a lot of issues with it breaking. So I built this soaking tube that I filled up with water and use fabric softener to allow the laminates I was bending to soak for a couple days, helping to saturate or rehydrate the wood fibers before steam bending them. So as I broke a few, I moved on to the soaking tube, had better success, and then got the first one kind of figured out and in clamps, and then moved on to actually the glue up portion of it. So I got the first one in glue up, let it sit overnight, and came out and took it out of the form. Glue appeared to be all dry, at least on this top side, but as soon as I took it out of the forms, I realized that it started to instantly delaminate. And when I flipped it over, I realized that the back side that was in contact with my work surface did not dry. And I think what happened is, since I used the work surface as kind of a caul to be able to pound all these laminates flush with each other, is it sealed up the bottom side and didn't allow that wood glue to actually dry. So big mistake right out of the gate. So I took a time out and decided to go to Home Depot and get myself some straight grain, knot-free 2x6 material to redo all of these slats and 2 chair leg assemblies. On top of that, I did actually make another leg form. That way I could do 2 legs at once and speed up my process. And I did find out that I can bend all 5 of these slats in one shot and not do 1 or 2 at a time. So that sped everything up. So now you're caught up to current day where I've got 2 acceptable chair legs that are ready to continue on with this chair build. All right, so with my leg assemblies now out of the glue forms, I'm gonna cheat and mill these up. And when I say cheat, I'm going to be actually gonna try out using my joiner. These are kind of a weird shape, so I think the joiner will be pretty straightforward on actually being able to join them through here. And now my planer, I think it'll work, but oh man, this could be an epic fail. All right, so with both legs milled up to their proper dimensions, it's time for me to figure out the height that I want these legs to be. So I just clamped them up to my outfeed table, visually looked at what I thought looked nice, struck a line on them, and then used my pole saw to cut those excessive ends off. And then I just used the first one as a template for my second one to ensure that they both were exactly the same size. Once that was complete, I temporarily mocked up the design of this chair by using some scrap wood and some clamps and played around with how I wanted the lower, we'll call it the lower seat brace and the back seat brace to be oriented on the seat. And then I used some plumber's tape to kind of help me visualize how I wanted the seat slats to actually be bent up and look. Once I had that figured out, I went back to my second piece of 2x6 material, and I ripped up 1¼ inch pieces that were 3/8 thick. I used, I think 8 in total, but I cut up plenty of them, more than 8. Once those were cut up, I took them over to my router table and put a round over on all 4 sides, and then brought them over to my soaking tube with my water and fabric softener and let those soak for about 2 days. And then into the steam box they went. bending up these seat slats was pretty much the same dog and pony show I experienced when I was bending the legs up. The problem this time was the grain orientation was running almost perfectly perpendicular with the bend radius that I needed to put in these seat slats. So I had quite a few splits, and that was half the reason why I decided to round over all 4 corners, was to hopefully prevent that problem from happening. The other thing is lazy me only decided to make up 1 bending form for all 8 of these slats. So that meant I could only bend 1 slat at a time. So I'd bend it up, allow it to dry in the forms for a couple hours, and then I would transition it over to my temped up chair assembly to let it further dry while I bent my other slats. So make up as many bending forms as you can for similar bending operations. Trust me, just do it. All right, with everything finally bent up, it's time to make the braces that will join the 2 chair legs together and give me a spot to screw the seat slats to. Now the braces will get tendons cut in the ends of them, and then corresponding mortises will get cut into the chair legs themselves. All right, so check this out. I just routed out the 2 mortises in this leg here. Well, notice how it says no on both of these? Well, that's because this is the outside of the leg, so I screwed up and put my mortises on the wrong side of the leg, and I've already done my other one, so I can't reverse it. So I'm gonna have to correct this. So fortunately, I've got some offcuts from when I cut these legs down. So what I'll have to do is just make a square plug to go in there and glue it in place. These mistakes drive me nuts. I get the learning curve as far as doing the steam bending, but I should know better than that. But hey, mistakes happen. I'll make a little plug for it, and hopefully it won't be as noticeable, but live and learn. Don't make the mistakes that I make. Now that all the joinery is cut, it's time to do a dry fit and then move on to doing a kind of an initial sanding. I'm gonna get my card scrapers out, my hand planes. I'll be truing up all the edges and running over all the corners. This will help me get to all the hard to reach spots before I do my final glue up and get this chair assembled. So now that the chair frame's finally out of glue up, it's time for me to permanently fasten my seat slats to the chair. So my plan is to use a countersink bit and some brass screws. But with the natural spring back that the seat slats have when they come out of their bending form, it's gonna require both my hands to hold that seat slat into position, which isn't gonna give me any additional hands to countersink a hole and drive a screw. So my thought is to use my finish nailer, tack it in place, and then come back, countersink a hole and drive a screw. Now the problem with that is my finish nailer is gonna leave a small hole in each of those seat slats that I would have to come back and apply a wood filler to, which I know as soon as I apply my finish, those are gonna stand out like a sore thumb. So moving forward, I'm gonna have to come up with a better plan. To finish the seat off, I decided to add a radius to the top and a headrest. Now this headrest will allow me to maintain equal seat slat spacing to the top, and then it will also make all these seat slats act as one, giving it a little bit more rigidity. I had just enough material to cut out a template for the headrest and the headrest itself. made this quick jig out of some leftover plywood, and this allowed me to maintain that equal slat spacing all the way up to the headrest. Headrest as a template and a flush trim bit in my router, it's time to trim the radius into these seat slats. Now this turned out to be a little bit more sketchy than I thought it would be, but in the end it worked out.
Nice distance!
The seat back cut, it's time to trim the bottom. I wished I would have left these a little bit longer so I could have put a matching radius in them, but I thought it was already looking a little bit too long for my daughter's legs as is, so I trimmed it up and then had her sit in it and realized that I did have some additional room there where I could have left them longer and put that matching radius in. So on the next chair, I'll definitely be doing that. I'm going with Danish oil for the finish. Now this chair is a prototype. It's gonna be under a covered deck that's not exposed to rainfall or direct sunlight, so I think it's gonna work out perfect for me. And although it does have good water resistance properties, it's got zero UV protection, so I wouldn't recommend it for outdoor furniture. All right, this has probably been the most frustrating and funnest projects that I've built to date. Now, I have zero experience designing furniture. Working with radiuses and curves has always been challenging for me to visualize up front or beforehand, and I've never steam bent anything prior to this chair. So this chair is actually a prototype. I built it for my daughter, and I do plan on duplicating it out of some nicer lumber. But I wanted to figure out the design side of things and the steam bending techniques. And I only used two 2x6s that I got at Home Depot. So it actually turned out pretty good for being my first one and the type of lumber that I used. But what I want to hear from you guys is what you think of the design, whether you hate it or you like it, or there's some things that you would change about it. So I am going to make another one of these, but I want to hear some feedback of things I could work on or change. So leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.